And now, Smart Club.
Hi, and welcome back to the committee program, a word that I've just said now several times incorrectly. Today, we're actually going to keep talking about Italian politics. We did just hear from Ludovico Manzoni about the presidential outcome and how that went. But today, we have with us friend of the show, Francesca Feo, who is, of course, a PhD researcher at the Scuola Normale Superiore in Florence, in Toscana. And look, last time, you really helped us get through kind of the nitty-gritty of Italian politics in this horse race way, and that's kind of what we were still doing with the president, who's up, who's down, who's smart, who's dumb. But actually today, wanted to bring up an issue that maybe gets at how policy actually gets made in Italy, how a bill becomes a law. And I think folks in the US may have the dual notion that there must be kind of just generally more progressive policy all over Europe because that's what's for dinner there. And also that there are probably sort of cultural barriers to getting things done. And those all came together in this, in the Zan Bill. And for those at home who don't know, the actual title of this bill is Measures to Prevent and Tackle Discrimination and Violence on Sex, Gender, Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Disability. And, you know, really kind of in that way that transgender rights does bring out a lot, it brought out a lot. But Francesca, what can you tell us about the origins of this bill? Why is it called the Zan Bill? Where did this come from? What did it mean?
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Aaron, for inviting me again to the program. I'm very happy to be here and to share a bit, talk about exactly this very important, fundamental, I would say, even piece of legislation that unfortunately I am already kind of getting to the end here. That was not approved by the Italian Parliament last November, November 2021. Yes. So what are we talking about here? First of all, exactly as you said from the title, which is a very long title and in a way tells us a bit about the nature of the bill, which is about exactly trying to recognizing LGBTQI plus rights in Italy. And Italy is one of the few countries in Europe where such a legislation is still lacking. And this was an attempt, and maybe we will get to that, of course, was not the first attempt by the Italian legislature, so the parliament, the legislative body, to kind of put forward some kind of regulation over these issues. And it's called the Zan Bill. This is the short name that was also in a way used and employed by media, by practitioners, and basically by all people involved in the discussion as well, civil society organization and so on. His name is taken by the main proponent, that was the MP, so Member of Parliament, Alessandro Zan, who belonged to the Democratic Party, so the major center-left party in Italy. And let's try to perhaps just recollect briefly what's the story of the bill and what the bill was actually about. So we have to go back to 2018 as the first, we are at the very beginning of the new, first government, very full-fledged populist government. So the coalition between Movimento 5 Stelle and the Northern League. And in this moment, the first draft, so the first proposal legislative bill was presented, which was kind of aiming at legislating in this field. Of course, the bill got completely stuck, and until basically the first government, there was a first change of government. So in a way, the Feister movement kind of reshuffled and went into coalition with the Democratic Party. So we are talking about a shift of governmental coalition from a populist, but also with a very strong populist radical right actor, being the League, to a center-left coalition, of the Feister movement together with the Democratic Party. In this new political setting, finally the Zan Bill, so this very first draft, was then basically arrived to the first reading in the lower chamber. And from that, we are now roughly in 2019, 1 year passed, and until the bill was actually approved by the first chamber, which is the Chamber of Deputies. Here, I need to make also a clarification. Italy has a bicameral parliament, so we have two different chambers. like a lower house and the upper house, which is the Senate, but both the two chambers have symmetric powers. What does it mean? That basically, in order to approve finally, like a law, this has to pass in the same form, so without changing not even a comma to the text, in both chambers. So at this time of the story in which we are now, we are basically, we are now in 2019, and the bill was approved by the first chamber. What is very interesting, and where the actual very heated discussion started also in the country, is afterwards. So what happened, in the second part basically of the legislative process, when finally the law kind of arrived into the Senate.
Which is a less representative body, just like in the US, just as
is slowly less. I would say is slowly less representative, but definitely not to the extent of the American Senate, because it's still of course, it's still elected by the citizens. It's more about restrictive citizenship, because basically to vote people in the Senate, the representative in the Senate, you have to be more than 25 years old. So basically young people are excluded, or very young people at least are excluded from this type of vote, and the type of representation that is given in the Senate is more based on a regional basis. So let's say that kind of the form of the constituency, it's a very technical thing, but this is what actually changed, is that basically senators are elected on a regional basis and not really on smaller constituencies as instead in the Chamber of Deputies. And I don't know, maybe I will probably here say, if I can, something more about the content of the bill before we pass into the actual dynamics and of the discussion, because
definitely.
This is definitely interesting, I think. So as you correctly said, this was a bill that mainly wanted to regulate and legislate something about the recognition of lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer people in Italy. This type of rights. And the bill was composed by different and also disabled people. Actually, this is an important addition, because this was something that was strongly encouraged and in a way asked for by the Five Star movement. Also, and we can say that as a way of kind of making the piece of law a bit more legitimate as well. So we are not only talking about sexual orientation and gender identity on this type of minorities, but we are also talking, and we are kind of legislating on issues that are in a way of interest for a broader population in Italy. So that was also kind of a strategy to make the bill a bit more appealing and kind of opening a leeway for the bill to be approved. But of course, as we can see, it didn't really work out fairly well. And so the bill had three main points that were then the things that were actually very much contested in the discussion. The first, as I said, was the attempt to basically explicitly, finally in the Italian penal code and so on, have discriminations based on discrimination, violence, and also hate speech on the ground of sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability finally sanctioned from the penal code. And this is important. So basically in a way kind of extending a law that is already there for ethno-racial crimes to this type of accusations and discriminations. The second part of the bill, which is also another article of the bill, wanted to, in a way, introduce into the Italian calendar, if we want, a national days following the International Day Against Homophobia, Bisphobia, and Transphobia, which is on the 17th of May. And so that was the second attempt of the bill, was to introduce this day in a way to also have discussions, civil society discussion, but also in discussions on school, in public institutions, about the importance of giving visibility to certain type of problem, to this discrimination, to this type of violence, and so on. And third, very important as well, was in a way the attempt to build at the local level an infrastructure for to provide assistance and support for people that are object of violence, and also on the other hand the creation of databases of homotransphobic assault. So basically, we can summarize this, an article of the bill was explicitly meant to make this type of crimes and violation more visible to the public opinion, basically like create data. And of course, data have a lot of power in the moment in which you, by data, by reporting, you make visible like some kind of discrimination that are just going on in the country and very often are not reported and so on. So these were the four main parts of the bill, and all of them were contested in different ways. Should I continue maybe, or?
Yeah, no, I definitely. And like, how did these things come together? Which were the people pushing it together? Who are the forces? Who's drafting this?
Exactly. And so, okay, like first of all, as I said, this bill was approved in the Chamber of Deputies with a fairly large majority that was composed by forces and parties of the Senate, like located in the central left of the political spectrum, namely the Democratic Part, as we say. The MP Alessandro Zan, who gave the name to the bill, was part of this party. So we had like a very kind of big majority composed by the Democratic Party, by the Five Star Movement, by like minor leftist parties, so Sinistra Italiana, Equals and Liberal, Liberi ed Eguali. And actually, what was interesting, I would say, was that Forza Italia, so Berlusconi's party, in a way gave like freedom of conscience to its MPs to vote on the bill. So there was not a party line really, but it was like left free for them to choose according to their own conscience. And so what we can see, the result is that basically exactly like this kind of vast majority, the only parties that didn't actually support the Zan bill during the first discussion and plenary discussion and then approval were, as we can expect, the League, so the Populist Radical Right Party led by Salvini, and
Matteo Salvini.
Exactly, and Brothers of Italy, so the other Populist Radical Right Party led by Giorgia Meloni. So that was a pretty, in a way, small or rather small, but quite identifiable like opposition to the bill. Things changed during the second vote in the Senate. And I think this is what is important to stress is that, and this is also the reason why actually the bill was not approved at the end, is that of course, like when we get to the discussion in the Senate, first of all, the law was basically like filibustered because by the president of the Justice Committee, where it was assigned. The president was a member of the League, and he actually postponed the discussion of the bill in the parliamentary committee for 6 months, as long as he could, basically. So this bill, even though it was already approved by the chamber, didn't get to any type of discussion in the Senate for 6 months. And then when the bill finally get to the discussion, of course, Italian politics is always very fast. There are a lot of things changing. We were already in a completely different era, basically. So we were already in 2021 with a technocratic government supported by a gross coalition. So everyone was involved in the coalition supporting the government, but Brothers of Italy. And of course, this changed a lot about we can say political equilibria in the parliament, in parliamentary politics, which makes some of the parties that previously supported the bill kind of withdraw their support. And this is what basically happened, and this is why the bill was not approved at the end in November 2021, 27th of October, actually.
So it's more of a, can we just not talk about this because our new governing partners, La Lega, don't want to talk about this, than a kind of harsh opposition, just kind of death by, can we put it in the drawer? Which is sometimes the worst, most solid kind of death, of course.
Exactly.
Do you think that, is it just because, even we have this parliament that has, of course, expired where the voting electorate is, so, Cinque Stelle and folks who are supportive are overrepresented, is the fact that La Lega was able to delay it until they could kill it a result of the fact that they are somehow better at these sort of parliamentary tricks and these kinds of things, or it's just they still have a lot of these residual powers of government for being such a popular large mass
Well,
party.
they are a popular large mass party, and they, of course, have a lot of representation in parliaments as well. So many of the seats in the Senate are actually belong actually to the League as a party. So there is, of course, like a different level of
these judicial seats and stuff.
Exactly.
They really have
At the end,
levers.
is very is kind of gritty parliamentary politics. What we are talking about as well. Plus, probably what we can say as well is that, I mean, there was not anymore a very clear orientation as well in public opinion. So of course, also in a way, the parties that were opposing the bill even managed to kind of frame the debate about the legislative bill, about the DDL Zan, in such a way that then also in public opinion, there was not so much of a kind of clear majority, or also a majority saying, but in a way, we just don't care so much, which is also sometimes important. You don't really necessarily have a strong majority in favor, but also simply a majority that is not at the end so interested. And this somehow also in the debate in the last months of the legislative debate somehow changed. So I don't know, to be honest. I cannot make any kind of causal claim here. What was the main driver for the failure? Of course, I don't know. Politics is complex and it's a lot of things together. But this is probably something that, also should be taken into account.
And then it does seem like a sort of at some point, by the time this gets to the public who don't follow politics in the same way that people who follow politics do, of course, it's a simple choice. It's yes on this thing or no on this thing. What do we all think? What were some of the public pressures? Interested to hear, for instance, where the Catholic Church came in, and how pressure how the public put pressure on the parties and vice versa. How other institutions were able to put pressure on the public.
Well, for sure, there is in Italy, and there has been also in the case of the DDL Zan, a strong opposition of the Catholic Church. And we also just remember we have the Catholic Church at home somehow. Of course, the Vatican City is in Rome, so there is a very strong proximity. And of course, it's very complicated to debate any issue, morality issue at the end in the country. Here we have seen it a lot. There is still a very strong public opinion that, in a way, even though society is secularizing, of course, still define itself as Catholic. And of course, there is a strong orientation by the Catholic Church in a way condemning anything that has connection to the issue of gender, especially gender identity, and the recognition of anything that is not the natural family made by a man and a woman, for example. So there has been a lot, of course, of this, in a way, pressure by the side of the church. And also during the parliamentary debates, for example, there has been a couple of instances in which the Catholic Church, so the diplomatic body of the Catholic Church, issued documents to the Italian government say we don't want this type of legislation. So really strongly stating that they were not in favor of such a bill, such a new regulation in the Italian penal system, basically. So this is, of course, very, very strong. Funnily enough, or not really funnily, but I mean, another point of opposition actually also came from within the feminist movement. And I think this can also be interesting because one of the most tricky parts of the bill, and actually what was really, really contested, was this, the presence in the bill itself of a lot of definitions. So the bill defined what is sex, what is gender identity, and so on, what is disability, what is sexual orientation, and so on. And of course, on the notion of gender identity, there has been a lot of controversy, not only from the kind of usual suspect, so the kind of conservative actors, including the church, but including the populist radical right, that of course has strong connection with the Catholic movement and so on, because of course there is not such a thing as a gender identity. Gender is not, in this view, a social construct. It's just a cultural, in a way, articulation of a biological difference that is there. And to be honest, on this point, also some parties, little fractions of the institutionalized feminist movement in Italy, were also against. So the idea of kind of reducing even the experience of oppression of women in something that can be like chosen on the basis of an individual choice was, of course, like not really accepted. And so, of course, this created still like another point of critique for the bill. I hope it's clear what I say. I mean, it's of course it's a very complex discussion. But,
no, it is.
Yeah.
No, it's look, and obviously you've been thinking and researching and writing about this, publishing on this. Like, do you think going forward, does the sort of failure of this bill mean that maybe these issues, which are important to a huge number of people for many different reasons, will get sort of made into smaller things to get through so that it's not sort of as complex? Or opposite, will it sort of even be using kind of a more universal notion so that you don't have to get the details right, which is, of course, something the right does better than the left generally. But like, you know, we need universal A, B, or C, and that includes X, Y, and Z, but it's not sort of in the title.
That's it's a very interesting like point. To be honest, I don't know. Of course, like, so what I can notice from the debate as it was gone so far is that this attempt has been made. So the attempt of saying, okay, let's de-escalate the discussion and let's try to find an agreement on like something that is, of course, not such an extensive change, but something that is a minor change, but on which all political forces agree on. So, for example, there has been like the proposal, especially on the right, to get rid of the gender identity notion, to not talk about it, to like, in a way, not even talk about kind of extending some of these like penal instruments of penal law to the sanction of this type of crimes, so of this type of discrimination, of violence against LGBTQI people, and so on. So there has been an attempt, and what happened is that, in a way, the progressive bloc, let's call it like this, even though it's probably like a debatable definition, but especially for the case of Italy, but they just said no, because of course, like, you know, it would have been again like retreating on certain type of position on a progressive point that they really wanted to make. So it's quite hard to understand where are we going, and especially I would say that definitely like a more general legislation is possible. So maybe there will be space for using and for producing like a legislation that doesn't go into much detail, with, of course, the potential like development that at the end, if you don't go too much in detail in treating these issues, you don't get any result at the end. It just stays at the level of symbolic policies, we would say, so something that is just, you know, like a symbolical acknowledgement of a situation that is there, but actually at the end, it doesn't really change, doesn't have really like a strong impact for those people that are, in a way, like suffering from discrimination, from violence, and so on. So this could be like a potential outcome. Is it desirable? I don't know, but could be something. And the other instead potential evolution would be that kind of, you know, the progressive forces will keep on insisting and presenting and kind of like, you know, not giving up on any of the content of the bill as it is. Mm-hmm. The only thing here is that there is an embargo now on these issues for at least 6 months, so they cannot present any new legislation on these issues until probably the summer 2022, and then we are going on election next year, and then of course, I mean, everything gets a bit fuzzy when we are talking about what is going to be like the next government and how this type of issues, not only like LGBTQI rights, but also issues of gender equality, abortion, and so on and so forth, will be treated from the next government. So in any case, it's not really, I would say, like a rosy future or perspective.
No, and my last question actually ties back to the last conversation we had on the program, which is, listening to you talk about this, seems to me like there might be a very dangerous fracture point on the progressive coalition where someone who is exactly Giorgia Meloni shaped, i.e. Giorgia Meloni, can exploit a kind of slightly turfy kind of what's in it for women call that may actually bring a surprising number of people who the center left count on as regular voters over. I mean, I think it's something that I think she's smart enough to jump on.
Unfortunately, I kind of agree with this reading as well. I mean, it's definitely something, and of course, we have seen it already. We discussed it already together in July. Of course, like Giorgia Meloni, and for the fact of being a woman and being also like the leader at the same time of this populist radical right party that is for now like first force in the country. So we should take this into account. At the moment, for the time being, like polls are definitely like in her favor. She's pretty much playing the gender card, and of course she's very much playing as well on the one side, like femo-nationalist type of discourse. So kind of like using feminist so-called like feminist issues, but with just as a strategy to kind of developing like a very harsh rhetoric with regards to migrants, for example. So kind of like, identifying migrants and especially male migrants as the perfect others that we don't want in the country because they are also like threatening our women and so on. So I would say, of course, like, I mean, there is probably like as well like another like possibility of a very essentialistic use from Giorgia Meloni of this like kind of women identity, so really essentializing gender to women experience and so on, that would then again exclude from any type of political discussion, and for political discussion I intend like legislative discussions, any possibility to even advancing like rights for our LGBTQI community. And we have seen it as well. I mean, we have seen as well, like how already, like during the discussion for the Istanbul Convention, so the issues about, gender violence and so on, there has been some steps back from the Brothers of Italy party. So yeah, I mean, again, as I say, it's a bit depressing to like the type of perspective that we have for now, but I really hope, we won't get that far. Sorry for like,
and we're going to leave it
kind of like
on that depressing note. No, I mean, look, there's nowhere to go from there except we certainly hope, at least tactically, I think there's things people can do and try differently and try for different outcomes. What are you working on now? What else you got going on before we let you go?
What else in terms of my own work?
Yeah, your own work. What do you want to plug?
Well, I am actually like continuing working on this issue of like LGBTQI rights and representation in the country. So this is what I'm up now, for example. So trying to understand a bit better in a bit nuanced way what has been the type of discussion about LGBTQI rights. So maybe at one point we can even talk about it again.